When it comes to horror, if I want to get in the Halloween spirit, it's all about the universal monsters. Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy, the Gill Man, my favorite for obvious reasons. If you've seen one of the rare videos where I mention my name, the movies are a little tame by today's standards, so when I need stronger stuff, I grab the hammer and smash these movies till they're soaked in glorious Eastman color red. Why am I hitting these poor misbegotten ghouls with a hammer? I'm talking about Hammer Film Productions, the British studio that released a string of Gothic revivals from the 50s to the 70s. These movies are admittedly also tame by today's standards, but back then, British censors were aghast. Amoral characters, violence, lust, unholy temptation. After successfully adapting BBC radio serials, Hammer set their sights on something bigger when BBC aired a sci-fi TV serial in 1953, The Quatermass Experiment. The show was a big hit for the 6 weeks it was on, and Hammer acquired the film rights. For the movie release, they dropped the E in experiment to emphasize the X, because they knew the film board would slap it with an adults-only X certification, which only stoked public interest even more. The movie was a box office hit, proving audiences loved boundary-pushing horror combined with a name they recognize. To feed their bloodlust, Hammer went in search of more and found the perfect monsters: Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy, the classics. In America, overexposure had robbed them of mystique and turned them into Abbott and Costello punchlines. Fun for sure, but Hammer knew they could make them scary again. It all started with their first color film, 1957's The Curse of Frankenstein. This movie didn't just resurrect a monster, it resurrected a genre. Sure, you could find horror in various flavors, a lot of sci-fi horror especially, but this was the return of horror in its purest form. Gothic horror. Critics didn't love it, but audiences ate it up. The film was a box office hit in the UK and abroad, especially in the US, heralding the era of Hammer horror. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Join me, if you dare, as we dive into The Curse of Frankenstein. More than 100 years ago, in a mountain village in Switzerland, lived a man whose strange experiments with the dead have since become legend. The legend is still told with horror the world over. It is the legend of The Curse of Frankenstein. After the introductory text, we join a priest en route to the prison, where one Baron Frankenstein awaits execution. One of my favorite parts of watching these classics is the hand-painted matte backgrounds. Even if they aren't always convincing as a real space, they're at least tangible as a picture made by human hands, and do a great job setting the mood. Now, why did Frankenstein ask to see this priest? Definitely not for spiritual comfort. It's because no one believes his story of what really happened. But the priest has to hear him out, and if the priest believes him, then maybe others will believe the priest. And it's important. If he cannot convince this man he's telling the truth, then 1 hour from now, he'll be dead. 1 hour? That really sets the stakes, but wow, he better be economical with the details when he tells this story. It also tells you a lot about Frankenstein. Clearly not a religious man if the priest gambit occurs this late in the game. Thanks to the makeup department, he oozes desperation and exhaustion just looking at him. But of course, it also comes through in Peter Cushing's performance. My introduction to Cushing was probably similar to a lot of people in my age group. I first saw him as Grand Moff Tarkin in Star Wars. He really nails the sophisticated sociopath role, which he embraces fully in this movie. The first of 22 movies he went on to make with Hammer, including 5 more in the Frankenstein series. Unlike the Universal movies, these ones focus on the scientist rather than the creature. He also played Van Helsing in 5 of the Hammer Dracula movies, opposite Christopher Lee as the vampire. Both actors are part of the it factor that make these movies special, bringing gravitas to the grotesque and profane. Frankenstein's story begins when he was a boy at school.
I always had a brilliant intellect.
Well, this story and my story start exactly the same way. In school, Frankenstein always felt frustrated at learning the same old thing. His teachers were teaching the same rubbish for 30 years. He thirsted for something new. This is like reading my own biography. Next, if he tries resurrecting the dead, I'm gonna need some royalties, because this is basically my life to a T. After Victor's mother died, he inherited the Frankenstein fortune, enabling him to finally take the reins of his own life. In Mary Shelley's original novel, Victor's mother's death deeply affects him. Many readers interpret his obsession with conquering death as a direct response to that loss. But in this movie, her passing basically boils down to, well, now that she's gone, I can finally do what I want to do without that old bat getting in the way. It perfectly captures the difference in this movie's approach to the story. As a young man, he showed the arrogance you'd expect, but performed the requisite niceties, like promising to pay his Aunt Sophie the same allowance his mother did.
Oh, you're a good boy, Victor. Your poor mother would...
Yes.
Yeah, I get it. You already got what you came for. Yes. Now get the hell out. I gotta focus on my work. I have 31 videos to make for October. I don't have time for this. Baron Victor Frankenstein. I feel like I'm looking in a mirror. Finally, Aunt Sophie leaves after not so subtly implying she'd love for Victor to marry his cousin one day. What? Victor Frankenstein? My life is nothing like his. Who told you that? Victor's next visitor is a scientist he called for, Paul Krempa, someone he wants to hire as his tutor. It only takes 2 years for him to subsume the entirety of Paul's scientific knowledge, and after that, they do as Victor always wanted, venture forth into the unknown. Over time, their research assumes a singular direction, reanimating the dead. There were a few scenes cut from these flashbacks, including one where a 14-year-old Victor tries to dissect a living rabbit, but his mom stops him, though even if she hadn't stepped in, the British censors were on the case as they definitely objected to this scene. It's interesting talking about an older movie like this where records weren't exactly meticulously kept. So for example, we know that scene was in a version of the script, but we don't know if it was filmed or not. Konstantin Nasser, a filmmaker and historian who provided one of the commentary tracks on the movie, says that he doesn't think the scene was filmed, but I find it fascinating that we don't actually know. I also agree with Nasser's sort of co-host for the commentary, Steve Haberman, who says it was probably a good thing the scene was cut. It gives away early on just how much of a sociopath Frankenstein can be, so it makes the rest of the film less surprising. This isn't one of those movies where a character changes over time. It's more like the character is revealed. We see just how little he cares for other people in the face of his one true passion, pushing beyond the limits of science. Allowing that to unravel over time makes for a more engaging viewing experience than giving it away too soon. One day, Victor and Paul's research pays off. Few tubes, a box, a spinny thing, and a sprinkle of water. With that, a dead dog is dead no more. Someone call John Wick. We can save the puppy before, and we're too late. He's killing everyone. Well, maybe it's better this way. Cushing plays the character as so uninterested and bored with people in everyday life, but with scientific breakthroughs, he quickly comes alive. Those are the few moments where you can sense real joy in him. This is also a good time to mention the set designs by Bernard Robinson. This was one of several Hammer movies where he handled production design. His trademark was making budget sets look expensive. One way he did that was by redressing and rearranging the same parts to make them look new. Multiple scenes in the same movie might use the same set, but you wouldn't know it. And then that set could be reworked and reused in other Hammer films just as seamlessly. Most importantly, the sets perfectly capture the mood and atmosphere. Everything from the cold, stone-built prison in the movie's opening to the ornate interiors at Frankenstein's manor. Even though we only see glimpses, the variety of unique rooms, along with doors, corridors, and stairwells in the background, suggest a genuinely expansive space. And of course, the production takes full advantage of color, with all the decorations and objects providing contrast, especially in the lab. I love all the bubbling liquids and just the variety of equipment. Paul wants to go public with their discovery, but Victor isn't ready yet. What they've done thus far is nothing. Bring back the dead? Pshaw! All they did was restore life that once was. That's cool and all, but you know what would be really impressive? If they created new life, built up their own creature from nothing. They got to take limbs and organs, stick them together, and build the most complex thing known to man. man itself. Kinda cheating. We're gonna build it from scratch. Now get me a bunch of body parts. So, not from scratch, you hypocrite. They must create a human being, a man with perfect physique, with the hands of an artist, and with the matured brain of a genius. And now you know my true origin story. Paul warns it's an affront to nature that can only end in evil. Yeah. The first thing they'll need is a body. Wouldn't you know it, last week they hanged a man, a highwayman. Highwaymen were sort of like land pirates. They stole from travelers, usually on horseback. If you hear that and think, finally, a career for me. Sorry to say they were only active from the 1600s into the mid to late 1800s, so you're about 200 years too late. As someone whose childhood dream was to work at Blockbuster, now you know how I feel. As a warning to others, the highwayman's body has been left on a gibbet just outside town. What the hell is a gibbet? It's a gallows. What's a gallows? The scaffold they hang criminals off of. I love how in movie time they've known each other for less than 10 minutes. In that time, Frankenstein learned everything Paul knows, they resurrected a dog, and now they're stealing corpses off gibbets. It's a beautiful friendship. In the darkness of night, they help themselves to the body. Back at the lab, they have a closer look. The head's been half eaten up by birds. Well, that's fine by Frankenstein. He has no use for that head anyway. So, he cuts it off and drops it in a vat of acid, and I love this movie. Cutting off the head is mostly left to the imagination, but apparently what upset critics at the time was the casual nature of it. The fact that he would decapitate a corpse and melt the head like it was no big deal was upsetting for some reason. Can you imagine one of those critics from back then watching the body melting scene in Breaking Bad today? That's honestly some of the fun of watching the movie now. Even if it seems tame, it has the look and feel of a late 50s movie, which sets certain expectations. When the movie bristles against those expectations, even hinting at the sort of blood and guts you only see today, there's a novelty to it. It feels more forbidden somehow, like the old days before we were desensitized by so much horror. They drop the headless body into a box, just like the one that brought the dog to life, only this box is man-sized. And what a man he is. Even without a head, he's huge. While Paul once again voices his misgivings, Victor heads out. He'll be back tomorrow night. I love Victor's almost manic work ethic and how he employs the talk so fast you hope your friend doesn't notice you've completely ignored their concern method. Gil, are you sure we should be making zombies in our basement? Hey, I'm hungry. Are you hungry? I'm gonna get something to eat. See ya. Bye. Rewatching the movie though, I can't help but notice how one note the Paul character becomes. It's just, Victor, this is an affront to science. Victor, this can only end in evil. He's like the Skylar of this show.
My name is Skylar White, yo.
He starts as a friend and scientific partner until Victor goes too far, but it isn't a slow descent. More like once Victor crosses the line, Paul switches to stick in the mud mode. If they could have told a more expansive version of the story, it would be cool to see that transition drawn out more. While Victor is away, his cousin Elizabeth drops by. Her mother recently passed away, and now she's moving in. Victor returns from his little trip and welcomes her with open arms. But no time for pleasantries, Victor has something to show Paul upstairs. Hands. Bardello's hands. The world's greatest sculptor died last week. All it took was a little bribery, and now those hands are in Victor's hand, and he can use them for the creature they're building. But Paul has decided to quit. They've gone too far. Victor is unconvinced. You really see some of Frankenstein's disconnect from other people here. When Paul warns, what if Elizabeth finds out what you're doing in the lab? Victor genuinely can't see the harm in it. So what if she finds out? And Paul remembers, right, you can't see the horror of what you're doing. This is part of unraveling Frankenstein's character, not evolving or changing, but revealing. And here we reveal a total lack of self-awareness. He doesn't just not care what other people think. He doesn't even have a pulse on what they're thinking. He has no idea people would be freaked out by this. Interesting to note, he's the main character, and to some extent, we can all identify with that feeling. Who doesn't worry too much about what other people think? And how freeing would it be to borrow a page from Frankenstein's book? Maybe not care so much. And that's one of the reasons we watch horror. In reality, there are boundaries. Horror allows us to push past them and satisfy morbid curiosity. Downstairs, Paul begs Elizabeth to leave. He can't explain why, other than to assure her this place will soon be unsafe. Victor is conducting experiments. What kind? I can't tell you. Well, then I'll ask Victor. Don't ask him. Why not? We are engaged, after all. It was an arrangement between Victor and her mother. Paul can't believe it. But she feels indebted to Victor. After all, she and her mom would have starved without his allowance. When Paul keeps pushing for her to leave, I love this line.
Really, Paul, I can't imagine why you make this idiotic request.
Something about it, the fact that everyone is speaking in such an old-fashioned, sophisticated manner, until it's like, you're an idiot. Elizabeth goes on, it's not just an arranged marriage. I've always wanted to marry him, and he's always wanted to marry me, and right now he's making out with the maid, Justine. What an idiot. That night, to Elizabeth's disappointment, Victor heads off again. He'll be back tomorrow evening. She wishes to spend more time with him, maybe even help with his experiments, and he says maybe one day she will. But it's said in the tone of like, maybe one day I'll give you 2 heads, or stick your brain in a reanimated dolphin or something. I don't know, there's been a lot of these movies. Time to try something different. Zombie dolphins, though apparently SeaWorld beat me to it. And Victor is off to the municipal charnel house. That's a place where skeletal remains are stored, often collected from old graves once the bodies are decomposed. They were historically common in Europe to deal with overcrowded cemeteries. You'd remove the old to make room for the new. I'm sure you've all been to one of these places. My school had field trips to the charnel house every year. It was awesome. You got to pick which bones you wanted to bring home. There, Victor collects his latest item. Is that what an eyeball looks like up close? Ew. And I'm not the only one who thought so, because this shot was removed back in '57 and only restored in modern releases after 60 years of censorship. Lucky us. While he inspects the eyeballs in his lab, Paul drops by at Victor's request. He hasn't been up there in a while, but has continued living in the house to make sure Elizabeth is safe. But Victor wants him to see his progress, see what he's been missing out on. Victor lifts the curtain.
What do you think of it? It's horrible.
Victor assures Paul, it's not the looks that matter, keep telling yourself that, and anyway, it won't look so bad once the scars heal. This movie knows why we're all here, that morbid curiosity. What does Frankenstein's monster look like with an X certificate? So of course it's initially obscured, but the movie tells us, don't worry, it'll be well worth the wait, considering Paul's reaction. But also, shut up, Paul. It's evil. You're evil. We get it. Though actually, I don't get it. I wish he could expand on the point. I guess it's based on the idea that creating life is playing God, so it's inherently evil, but obviously that argument is bouncing off Victor. So, say more. What's so evil about stitching a bunch of body parts together to create a soulless monster to do your bidding? Maybe he has a point. So how far along is Victor? The body is done. All he needs now, a brain. Ideally one with superior intellect and a lifetime of knowledge already gathered. Then one of my favorite lines. Paul asks, where are you going to get a brain like that? And Victor answers,
I'll get it.
There's a fun self-awareness to it. Victor knows Paul sees him as evil, so he's like, let me play into that a little by answering his question without answering it at all, and with a very obviously menacing tone. Though the answer is obvious to us when we cut to Victor and Elizabeth laughing with a houseguest, a professor, Professor Bernstein, someone with intellect and knowledge. What are Victor's plans for the elderly professor? Well, let me tell you. Oh, hi, Paul. I thought you weren't coming back until the morning. Victor is clearly perturbed. He leaves Paul with Elizabeth and takes Bernstein to his quarters. Along the way,
you know, I'm alone in the world.
Yep, if someone were to kill me right now, no one would miss me at all. No one would even notice I was gone for weeks probably. I almost wish someone would kill me. Yet, alas, very interesting, Professor. Hey, why don't you take a look at this picture here? No, stand further back, right up against the railing. Oh my God, look out! And Victor pushes him off the upstairs overlook to his death, making it look like an accident. Victor is kind of an idiot. If he really were a genius, you'd expect a more clever murder plan, not one where everyone in the other room obviously knows he killed the professor. Like, where do you think Victor went? He's definitely killing that guy, right? Not to mention, blunt force trauma to the head feels like a bad idea when you need his brain intact. Look, it's a silly movie in a lot of ways, but presented with that prestige, from the sets to the performances, it's that unique Hammer horror vibe. Before the professor dies, I enjoy the conversation between him and Victor. The professor is older, wiser, reminding Victor that you can become distracted seeking out obscure truths, searching and researching until you're too old to enjoy life. He talks about how the value of knowledge comes from its usefulness to mankind. It draws a stark contrast to Victor's approach, where there is no why, just a thirst for new discoveries, which manifests like an addiction. He always needs a bigger high. Resurrect the dead? Sure, that was great for about 2 minutes. Now, how about creating life itself? After the professor's death, Victor kindly offers up his own family vault as his final resting place. After the funeral, after the sun goes down, Victor rips open Bernstein's coffin and stakes him through the heart. Wrong movie. All he does is cut open his skull and put his brain in a jar. I love the graveyard shot, which was done on a soundstage. It is quintessential horror and the perfect image for the Halloween spirit. Worth noting, this movie only has a couple of exterior locations, but thanks to the set design, the pacing, and the engrossing character, you don't notice it, and you don't feel like it's too small a movie. Like most of the other surgeries, a lot is left to the imagination, but they give you all the material you need for that imagination, like the surgical tools laid out on the bright red instrument roll, another great use of color, especially in the drab crypt set. It's after the brain is removed that Paul finds Victor in the vault. Paul is sure that Victor murdered the old man. He can't prove it, but he can't stop him from using the man's brain. They struggle over it, and the jar is smashed.
If you've done this.
As angry as Paul gets, it still feels like an underreaction. His anger here is not much different than the moral outrage he's been showing for the last 20 minutes. But it should be more, since committing actual murder is crossing a pretty big line. It's also kind of pathetic that the best opposition he can offer is a game of keep away with Bernstein's brain, as if that minor interference will stop Victor when he's already shown he's willing to kill for this. At best, you'll damage the brain. And if your hope is to stop an unethical experiment, what's worse? The professor waking up in a weird stitched-together body, or the professor waking up in a weird stitched-together body, and on top of that, his brain is damaged. It's idiotic. In the house, Paul once again begs Elizabeth to leave. As always, she won't have it. She won't believe a bad word about her Victor. In the lab, Victor inspects the brain. He removes shards of glass and hopes for the best when he sticks it into the skull of his new creature. It's the perfect night for Genesis, the creation of life from scratch. If by from scratch you mean literally the opposite of from scratch, how is this any different from reanimating a corpse? Well, first I moved the brain to another skull. So? And the hands are different. I took them from Bardello. Under a lightning storm, Victor turns on the bubblers, blinkers, spinners, and everything else. But he stops in the middle and visits Paul. The apparatus was built for dual operation. He needs help. Paul smiles. That means the experiment will fail, because of course he will not be lending a hand, or any other body parts. Meanwhile, a lightning strike sets off the equipment. Oh my god, the body's chest is heaving. It's begun to breathe. And the movie continues to tease us, because though the body is out from behind the curtain, now it's covered up in bandages. Though if this were a modern movie and wasn't getting the nostalgia and cultural importance bump, I feel like we'd complain about this scene. Victor can't turn on the machine without Paul's help. Hey, good thing lightning happened to strike, and rather than fry the equipment, it actually resurrects the thing. But it's Frankenstein, there had to be lightning. You could read it as divine intervention, the irony that in the end, Victor could not ultimately create his own life. Except later on he'll do it again off screen like it's no big deal, which sort of undercuts that angle. Downstairs, Victor continues his attempt to recruit Paul. Join me, and I promise to dispose of the creature in a month or two once I've proven my theories. Otherwise, I'll find a way to make it work myself, and I'll even find a way to get Elizabeth involved. Victor somehow keeps finding new ways to sink to new depths. He doesn't seem to care about Elizabeth one way or another, but Paul cares, and that's all it takes for Victor to threaten her to try and force his hand. Victor's begging and pleading failed. Threats, on the other hand, yeah, that works. Paul agrees to help out. Victor and Paul return to the lab and find a bandaged man standing of his own accord. Oh my god, a mummy! Wrong movie. Victor's creature, now animated, removes the bandages on his face to reveal Saruman. Yes, this is the legendary Christopher Lee's introduction to the world of Hammer horror. This moment is another great contrast to the 1931 Frankenstein, because it's way more gruesome. It's genuinely unpleasant to look at, which better makes the point about Victor's bizarre experiments. The creature grabs Victor and chokes him until Paul knocks the thing unconscious with a chair shot. Before it wakes, they restrain it. Victor is ecstatic. Sure, he's a little f***ed up, but that's Paul's fault. He damaged the brain. Yeah, sure, he damaged the brain after you pushed Bernstein head first off a balcony. By the way, Paul probably did you a favor, damaging the parts of the brain that, remember, you're the one who killed him. Anyway, Victor is dead set on repairing the brain. The experiment will go on. Once again, Paul storms out in a huff. Before Victor can operate on the creature's brain, it goes missing. Where has it gone? They must find it. Meanwhile, a boy and his blind grandpa take a hike in the nearby woods. The grandpa sits down while the boy runs off for a moment. That's when the creature arrives. The old man panics. He waves his stick defensively. The creature breaks it. The man staggers and falls down. The creature is curious. He approaches the man on the ground, and he kills the man on the ground. Unlike the novel and 30s film version of the creature, this one shows little to no humanity. Lee performs the creature as a creature, totally animalistic, with bizarre, jerky movements, especially intimidating with Christopher Lee's 6'5" frame. Ultimately, he comes across more like a Romero zombie, but with a faint spark behind his eyes. Mostly vacant, yes, but he'll stare for a second or two with some curiosity before he kills. Also, I feel bad for the old man. He doesn't really get mentioned again. He's totally just here to remind us that the creature isn't only an affront to nature, but also genuinely dangerous. Paul and Victor follow his trail in the woods. They spot him, and despite Victor's protests, Paul shoots it in the head. Now the creature is animated no longer. They bury it. Victor promises he'll never forgive Paul for what he's done. With the creature dead and no more concern for Elizabeth, Paul leaves. Elizabeth and Justine obviously exist in this movie as little more than pawns and innocent victims to add stakes. It doesn't paint Paul in the best light that he only seems concerned over Elizabeth. I guess he's taking the Succession approach with Justine, the maid, NRPI, no real person involved. It does feed into the theme inherent in this movie, the tendency for some to look down on others as less than human. It's something Victor does consistently, showing no regard for his fiancé's or mistress's feelings, showing no hesitation to murder or threaten. He's obviously a sociopath, but it's something that's enabled by his aristocratic status, and something he only earned by the fortune of being born a Frankenstein. Once Paul is gone, Victor opens a door that leads to a room where he's already unburied the creature and hung him from a hook.
I'll give you life again.
Downstairs, bigger concerns. Justine, the maid, has gotten wise to the fact that Victor's cousin Elizabeth is more than a friend or more than family. She's Victor's fiancée. What the hell? He promised Justine he'd marry her. Victor only laughs and tosses her away, tells her to get back to work, but she pleads, "You have to marry me. I'm going to have a child." When he still doesn't budge, she tries threats instead. "I'll tell everyone. I'll tell Elizabeth what you're doing in that laboratory. Marry me, or I'll even tell the authorities about what you did." A thinly veiled threat about his murder of the professor. He orders her out of the house by morning. He isn't worried. She doesn't have proof anyway. Frankenstein is such a jerk. He isn't just callous, but outright sadistic. He literally laughs in Justine's face, like he enjoys her emotional turmoil. It's interesting to me in the same way as the suggested gore, where it's just surprising to see in a movie from 1957. This was all part of the design. According to Haberman, director Terence Fisher was instructed by producer Anthony Hines, son of the Hammer founder William Hines, to make this movie slow, elegant, and shocking with just a hint of sex. I'd say he nailed it. It's also funny how all these characters basically beg Victor to kill them. The professor, I'm all alone in the world, now let me turn my back on you. Or Justine, I'm going to tell everyone what you did and ruin your life. It'd be a shame if someone were to kill me. In the middle of the night, she snoops in his lab and gets distracted by vermin. Cute little lab rats. While Frankenstein's apparently resurrected creature sneaks up behind her, she panics and reaches for the door, while Frankenstein locks it from the other side and listens to her death scream. Soon, time for the wedding. The evening before, they entertain guests. After they leave, Elizabeth figures it's time to... No, don't be gross.
I thought
Oh, come, Elizabeth. We are not sentimental young lovers.
No, he has work to do in his lab. I mean, laboratory. Late in the night, Paul arrives. Elizabeth had invited him, but he didn't show until now. She suggests, why not surprise Victor in the lab? I'm sure he'd love that. Actually, Victor is happy to see him. He's got something to show him. Paul is way too happy in these scenes. I understand if you have a falling out with your friend, and then a few months later, even without apologies, bygones are bygones. But Victor murdered someone. That requires at least a conversation. And when Victor is coyly like, I have something to show you, Paul is like, oh yeah, what is it? When it's obvious that Victor is going to show him the creature. All Paul did was destroy one brain. A brain Victor very easily acquired. Even if Paul thinks Victor won't be able to repair the brain, isn't it obvious that Victor would just get another one? The movie really hinges on the assumption that it's really hard to get a brain. So once you have one, even if it's bruised up and busted, you have to use that one. Except we saw him get the brain, and it was really easy. So what is Victor so eager to show Paul? The creature. It's the creature. Come on, try and keep up. Victor explains, yes, life left the body, but I'm the one who put it there to begin with. Putting it back again was even easier than the first time. But wait, there's more. It responds to basic commands. Get up, come here. Sometimes the commands need to be repeated, but ultimately he complies. There's little in this movie in the way of probing the creature's nature. Is he the equivalent of a human that happens to have brain damage? Or is its core nature altered by having previously died twice? But that's not what these movies are about, or at least not this one. The creature only exists as a manifestation of Victor's callous scientific insanity. It's why Victor is the star of these movies rather than the creature. Paul is disgusted. This is your being of supreme intellect? It's an animal. That's when Victor reminds him, this is your fault. You damaged the brain. Then put a bullet in it for good measure. But Victor promises he will not stop. He will repair the brain or find another if he must. He'll try again and again until it works. At that, Paul announces he'll finally go to the authorities. He storms out, and Victor follows to try and stop him. With them out of the house, Elizabeth heads upstairs to see what's really going on in the lab. It's then the creature realizes what it is that stifles its movements. The chain. He pulls it out of the wall. Elizabeth follows the sound of that chain rattling. She follows it up to the roof. When Paul and Victor see her up there with the monster, they stop arguing for a second. Paul runs to the village to get help, while Victor heads after the creature himself. He gets to the roof and shoots at it. The first bullet misses, unless he meant to hit Elizabeth. I wouldn't put it past him. Don't worry, she survives. The second bullet does hit the creature. Then he throws the gun at it. I hope he only had 2 bullets, otherwise I'm questioning Victor's brilliant intellect. The creature lumbers toward him until Victor throws a lantern at him. The creature, now on fire, thrashes until he conveniently falls through a window into Victor's vat of acid. Now we return to the prison, where Victor finishes telling all this to the priest. Why does he think this story is going to make him sound innocent? Another visitor arrives. Paul. Victor is excited. The priest doesn't believe his story, but Paul will back him up. Again, even if they believe you, I don't know if that'll help. Paul walks in and Victor begs him, "Tell them I didn't kill Justine. It was the creature." But no matter how much Victor begs or threatens, Paul keeps his mouth shut. He takes Elizabeth home while the guards escort Victor to the guillotine. I love the eerie final shot with the credits rolling over the silhouette of the guillotine in front of the night sky. It feels like a sad final judgment on this evil character. There's no flirtation with redemption or lessons learned, just this. A quiet march to the scaffold. In the end, I love this movie as a time capsule you rip open to just huff pure gothic horror. The set designs, along with James Bernard's score, evoke the perfect atmosphere. The late 50s aesthetic, clashing against the shocking content, gives the movie a forbidden vibe, perfect if you're trying to get in the Halloween spirit. Cushing's performance as the incredibly sociopathic Frankenstein keeps you glued to the screen waiting to see what depravities he'll sink to next. And Christopher Lee does not disappoint as the manifestation of those depravities. And thus ends the story of Baron Frankenstein, except for the 5 sequels. Month of Terror continues tomorrow with Sinister.